So I think for me, one of the big sort of things that's happening right now is very much the, I guess, kind of sort of realignment. I mean, the thing that I've been seeing over sort of recent weeks is this real kind of realignment of opportunity. We've been living, very much in the last, I guess, well, sort of 20 years really, working really from an old paradigm where it was very much a marketing mix that was created, I guess you could say, some sort of 30, 40, even kind of 50 years ago. And a lot of the time we've been working from that old paradigm, which feels very kind of outdated right now. And I think for me, one of the big opportunities here, if we take all of the kind of health and political and economic sort of issues out of play here, and just purely kind of focus in on the sort of the whole marketing thing, I think for me, one of the big sort of clear opportunities is to almost like refresh or reboot as an organisation, be you a large one or a small one. And I think this is what we're going to really be seeing on the other side. I think in lots of ways we've seen some brands already beginning to kind of realign and sort of offer additional value. And I think that's something I want to talk about in a minute. Is this whole kind of trying to identify how and where you can pivot. And I know the word pivot has been a word that's been kind of almost sort of used as a bit of a cliche in sort of entrepreneurial circles, where people say, oh, I'm going to pivot, and first thing didn't work, so I'm going to pivot and try sort of version 2. But I think as brands and as marketers, we're in an amazing, probably unprecedented opportunity to kind of use that word pivot to kind of figure out what other value we might be able to add to, I guess, existing customers or maybe new customers, and in lots of ways even potentially sort of reinvent ourselves. And I think that's going to be a really exciting opportunity, and already seeing examples of that. I mean, organisations like Morrison's, the first ones to say we're feeding the nation, and I noticed over the last sort of 24 hours or so, if you go on to the other main sort of retail and sort of particularly the grocery sort of brands, you'll see that a lot of them now are sort of talking in slightly different wording, but it kind of is very much the same sentiment about feeding the nation, whereas Morrison's were the first ones to come out and actually state the fact that this was very much like a higher purpose, a higher value that they were bringing. So not just delivery of food, but actually, analysing the market and saying there are more vulnerable people, we need to provide additional value to them. And I think that, for me, is a really nice example of kind of almost sort of redefining who you are. So you don't just sell food, you actually provide service, but service at a really sort of tangible level. Another nice example I've seen sort of quite recently was the clothing brand Zara, who said, right, we're going to stop production of our sort of clothing lines, and we're actually just going to make face protection masks. And obviously, however long that carries on, I don't know the detail, but I just again thought, what a nice example of just saying, look, this whole situation and scenario, this kind of higher sort of value that we all need to be adding and collaborating with, is more than us just making profit. And I think, again, on the other side, what we're going to see is that things like profit almost potentially could become quite an ugly word. And so I think we need to be very careful how we sell, and I'll come on to that in a minute. I think this whole sort of use of marketing to help the sales cause, I think, is almost going to go back into its shell very, very quickly, because it's going to feel on the other side very inappropriate. And I think organizations and businesses who still feel that the old sales paradigm of, I want to get customers, I want to make money from my products, I think they're going to find that they are going to be outpaced very, very quickly by organizations who kind of get this and get this whole kind of value piece. So I think what we're seeing is very much marketing being identifying kind of what is the core purpose of the organization, where is the value add around that, and kind of it's in the eyes of all stakeholders. So it's customers, it's the supply chain, it's anybody in the local community, it's anybody in the broader society if you're a huge kind of multinational brand. And I think that's where the debate and the conversation and the kind of the whole marketing focus is going to go. And I don't think it's going to just be a case of, oh, we're back in play now, our staff are back from being furloughed, we can start doing business again, let's switch on all those kind of direct marketing channels, let's start selling again. I think is going to become pretty obsolete, and I'm certainly welcoming that, because I think brands who have told good stories, brands who have not been greenwashing, and brands who have been really authentic and transparent are going to be the ones on the other side who are going to be the authentic, the successful, the sustainable brands of the future. It just takes me back to Mark Carney's comments late last year, when he was saying that any organisation who isn't sustainable in the future is not going to be in business. And I just thought, well, that's a lovely kind of stake in the ground that sort of says, hey guys, we've got to take this seriously. And if you still work to the old marketing model and still think it's product, place, price, promotion, it just doesn't work. It really doesn't. And I think on the other side, we've got to figure out how this thing is going to look for our, the people that we've got, the product in the warehouse, or whatever it is that you do. And I think that's where it's going to be. It's going to be, okay, so where can we add some real value? Can we charge for that value? And then if we do make some money on the side, is how are we going to invest that? Because that reinvestment's got to be done, again, ethically. It's got to be done in a sustainable way for the business, because we've still got to be here, but it's got to be done in the right way. And I think there's this, almost beautiful, perfect storm manifesting in front of us that's going to challenge, and I think it's going to make our lives as marketers really, really interesting. And I think anybody who thinks it's going to be business as normal, and I see a lot of this in social media right now, people and organizations saying, oh, when we get back to normal, I'm predicting and hoping with hand on heart that there is no such thing as normal anymore. There'll be a new normal on the other side. So I guess my sort of best advice, having sort of started talking about this perfect storm kind of middle of last year, and just thought that, there's something coming. There is something coming. I think now, obviously, this whole kind of wake-up call and time for sort of self-reflection, I think now is the big opportunity to kind of sit back, go into our sort of self-isolation holes, and kind of really ponder and figure this thing out. And I think for me, that's probably the most exciting, positive thing that we have right now, is what is the other side going to look like? And we don't have to accept all the old ways. And yeah, very, very excited, as you can probably tell. Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, and I do get sort of asked this question a lot, and I think for me it's about projecting kind of into the future a little bit, not necessarily like sort of 10, 20 years time, but I think probably maybe sort of 5 or 6 years time, and almost kind of figuring out, actually, what would I like to be doing? Do I know what I'd like to be doing? What kind of role, maybe what kind of organisation? It might be the existing organisation that you're in, or it could be another one, maybe different sector, maybe not. But it's kind of, I think, sort of figuring out what are the things that I feel most passionately about? Where do I think I can make a difference? Obviously, there's a big kind of sway at the moment towards the whole sort of digital piece, and in lots of ways, I think certainly if you're looking to specialize in digital, that can be a hugely powerful and really, really interesting thing to be going down. I think for me, if there's a sort of a more holistic view that you're looking for, and by that I mean not kind of narrowing yourself down to just purely digital, so maybe incorporating some of the communication sides of PR, for example, maybe obviously looking at maybe the more sort of strategic decision making, kind of bringing that into the mix. So again, you mentioned sort of psychology there. I mean, some of the kind of behavioral pieces. I think it's almost then the more generic as a role, generic as a qualification you go for, the more kind of exposure you'll have in those. But obviously then you won't get the deep dives of the things that you'll get in, obviously, the existing course that you're on, which obviously, if that is where you want to be specialising in the future, that would obviously be then, a big tick in the box. So I think, I'm kind of answering, but I'm kind of not answering. And I guess this is kind of part of the challenge, is that it's very much that for me, the qualification needs to kind of support the journey that you believe you're on, but at the same time, not restrict yourself so much that you feel, oh, actually, I've kind of blocked myself into a corner, a little bit like the SEO and stuff that you're finding now. Because if that isn't something that really excites you, then it's almost like you've gone down this kind of sort of blind alley, which obviously is a challenge. So you get lots of great skills, but if they're not the things that you want to actually be practicing, then obviously that in itself is a bit of a challenge. So I think for me, probably the starting point is almost 5-6 years in the future, and kind of almost turn around and look back at yourself and kind of almost try to reverse engineer the journey that got you there. So it's almost like yeah, it's kind of manifesting this thing really. It's kind of looking outwards and just sort of thinking, okay, that's the kind of role I can see myself and feel myself doing. So I turn up at work on a Monday morning and that's what I'm going to be doing today. Cool, I'd be really excited by that. And then kind of turn around and sort of think, well, okay, so what are the building blocks I need to put in place? So it could be, yeah, I need to upskill in digital. So that could be, I want to do a full-on digital course, or you might decide there are certain elements of that that you want to pick and mix. So you could do, because certainly the CIM, which obviously I can only really speak for the CIM and CIPR stuff, but the CIM stuff you can do as awards. So if there's a particular kind of element there that's of interest, and it could be sort of integrated communications, for example, just pick a random subject, that could be something you think, oh, no, that's really interesting. I really want to kind of specialize in that. So rather than thinking about the course as a whole, think maybe about the sort of constituent parts that excite you. I mean, certainly both the level 4 and 6 do give you the opportunity to kind of explore the sort of decision making side of it, a little bit more strategic. In terms of the assessment, obviously the level 6 is a lot more strategic, so it looks at kind of decision making and the like. But level 4 is very much supporting those decisions, so that there is an opportunity, if you went for the more kind of generic qualification rather than say purely digital, to kind of talk about strategy and behavior and stuff. And certainly in the digital level 4 there is a lot in terms of sort of online behavior. I wouldn't say it goes all the way to kind of UX, user experience and stuff, but it kind of does touch on it as a discipline. And a lot of the stuff now I'm finding, so when I teach it, is based around the whole concept of customer journey, which obviously is a very kind of sort of generic, sort of all-encompassing topic, which comes into a little bit of psychology as people go through the awareness phase before they convert, and how do you keep customers retained, by the sort of the drip feed, etc., etc. So a lot of that is kind of marketing psychology. I would say it's not pure psychology, but certainly marketing psychology. So I think, yeah, I mean, you certainly get a flavour of that, and I think there is potentially a bit of flexibility in the kind of study methods as well, whilst obviously you get the core, as you get the core sort of study guides and the sessions. But I think certainly from the broader kind of reading lists and stuff that tutors get sent, there's an opportunity to kind of figure out, if you do have a particular sort of topic that you're interested in, there's an opportunity to very much sort of do wider reading should that be of interest. So I think, yeah, you can, I wouldn't say the words customize it, but you can certainly adapt it a little bit to kind of fit what you're looking for. The online sessions are recordings, but we do, well, certainly a number of the tutors do the sort of live webinars. I tend to do sort of quite frequent webinars, just because I love doing it. I love seeing myself on screen. No, I'm joking. Well, kind of. But it's I just find it's really nice to be able to bring in some of the more kind of up-to-date examples, because obviously a lot of stuff, once you printed a study guide or a book, the thing's out of date instantly. So what I try and do is kind of top it up with kind of more recent examples that obviously reflect what's going on actually in the media right now. So yeah, it's not completely canned. I mean, obviously the vast majority of the materials are kind of set and they're all scheduled to do at certain points. But yeah, I mean, certainly there is a kind of a top up that sort of sits around it, but it isn't, I mean, I'll be completely open and honest with you, I mean, it isn't exactly like sitting in a classroom, and that kind of group work and that sort of interaction and dynamic is very different. And in lots of ways, I mean, I don't want to sort of say, oh, jump on straight onto the online stuff if you don't feel really that that's a suitable thing. I mean, as I say, in the interim, because obviously we don't know how long this is all going to last, I mean, the interim, potentially, you might sort of consider maybe doing one of the awards. Very interesting little conversation there. I had to go private, couldn't share that one because it was relating to a particular inquirer's questions about not only the kind of state of marketing right now, but also very interestingly how to kind of shape up and develop a marketing career based around learning and continuous development. And we had a really interesting conversation, which is a bit of a shame I couldn't share with you, but I'm going to kind of paraphrase it right now. One of the questions that was asked was very much around the concept of how do you know which course to choose? And how do you know which kind of gaps that you have? And so what we did is we explored the idea of kind of projecting forward into the future and almost in your mind's eye, picturing yourself on a Monday morning going into the perfect role, the perfect marketing job, and then thinking about, well, okay, what are the constituent parts? How would that look? How would that kind of feel? And maybe looking sort of 5-6 years out, and then that gives you this nice kind of horizon from which you can then start an interesting conversation with yourself, which is if you were to turn around and look backwards from that point, then what you should do is you should see this almost like route map to get you to that point from now. So it'll then hopefully identify where you've got gaps, things that you're going to need to upskill in, where there's certain types of experience or knowledge that you need to gain in that time, and also where there's new areas and new experience that you haven't even encountered yet. So it's about identifying those steps and those gaps and those modules, those awards, those courses that you need, and the experience, of course, running in parallel with that, that you need to get you to that perfect role. So that was a really lovely question, and as we explored the answer to that, I thought just, it's really good for all of us to be doing that. And I think particularly now in these potentially quite uncertain times where a lot of people in certain organisations aren't really quite sure if they're going to be going back to a job, let alone sort of knowing what the job is right now, and even if that is secure, kind of working out about their brand, about their organisation, kind of how the next phase of the organisation is going to look. Because markets will change. On the other side of all of this, the markets will be very, very different. Your customers' expectations will be very, very different. So maybe now is a great time to kind of project forward, both for you and for the brand that you work with or the business that you're in. Kind of project forward and have a little look and sort of explore what those opportunities might be and kind of where you might see that you can add some value. Maybe there is this higher purpose that you've been dreaming about, but actually you haven't really been focusing on it. So this now could be the time to be looking at that. So with that lovely example that I just had with that recent inquirer, we just went through that exercise of kind of projecting forward, imagining that almost perfect day, and then looking backwards, turning around through 180 degrees and looking back to where you are now and seeing where those gaps are, because that is the change curve that you're going to be going through. And it's hugely exciting. You could do this same thing with your brand, with your business. Maybe you're in a startup and you're thinking, we've got to really change everything now because what we were planning to do really isn't relevant anymore. Or you could be a really established business looking to break into new markets or literally to just survive. This is an exercise that really has to be done at a personal level, but also at a business level. So it was really lovely just kind of talking that through with somebody who is genuinely in that situation right now. So really quite exciting for them. And she went away sort of saying, I've got a lot of questioning to do. I've got a lot of kind of soul searching to do to figure out what that kind of ideal scenario is. And why not? Why not now set that ideal scenario as your goal, as your benchmark, as your destination? This is unprecedented times, as I mentioned earlier. We've never been in this situation before. Certainly in the current sort of modern age, at even a national level, let alone global level, we've never had an opportunity to both reinvent, but also rethink and reimagine the role that we have personally and as a business. So to me, that's one of the most profound and fundamental opportunities within this really uncertain time, where I know a lot of people are taking at the moment the fear and anxiety route rather than the route of positivity and opportunity. But hopefully in the coming weeks, you'll get to a stage where you think, actually, this is that moment, this is that time when I want to do that. So if that does happen to you, and I really genuinely hope it will, because it's a wonderful feeling once you get to that point, you think, this is the moment, this is the time when I'm going to do it. And if you do get to that point, then you can just confidently go into it knowing that actually nobody's really counting right now, nobody's really watching. There are new rules, because the old rules simply don't apply. So maybe there's a little kind of checklist that you can work from here. So if sort of projecting forward 5 or 6 years hence, both personally and professionally, is a little bit of a step too far, just think, well, okay, what kind of skills, what kind of values do I bring to the mix? What things do I bring to the party right now? What things would I like to be bringing to the party, but I don't quite have yet, so I need to kind of upskill and learn. So maybe then you've got this kind of toolkit of things that you can offer to the world, and if you can find those things and identify them, they can be vague, they don't have to be completely sort of watertight and tied down right now, but it's an opportunity to reflect and think about those things, and if you do, that potentially gives you a lovely starting point for then thinking, okay, this is going to get fun, right? So that's kind of what I bring to the world in many ways. Where can I see people, individuals, groups, sectors, markets, societies, communities, where can I see that there would be value taken from what I have to add and what I have to offer? And if you can identify maybe groups of individuals, maybe even one example of one named individual who you already know, and if you don't know anybody who's going to be identifying with this, well, then there's a big question mark there as to kind of, well, what value were you providing in the old model? Because going forward, it's about kind of matching those two things together. It's about figuring out what can I bring to the party and who are the people who are going to see the most value from that. Because if I can align those two things, then I'm starting to really bring something back with what I do, the time that I spend, the investment that I make in resources, time, money, effort, energy. And if I can match those two things together, then I could be onto something. Then when you get to that kind of point, I think it's all about becoming a little bit more clear and a little bit more candid with yourself and honest with yourself about the definitions and the descriptions of what we're talking about here. So I said at the start to do this in quite a vague, kind of maybe slightly ambiguous way, but there comes a point when you've kind of listed all of those things out or drawn all those things out on a mind map where you need to start thinking a little bit more clearly about, okay, let's really define this down. So if I say one of the things that I bring is the power of facilitation, for example, just going to use a random thing that popped into my head. So maybe if you're a good facilitator, now that's a value that you bring. Think, okay, so who would really benefit from facilitation skills? Well, in lots of ways, you could argue it's probably networks. There's a lot of networks and associations and groups and communities who meet to network, to develop business, to develop ideas, to build philosophies, to increase and create thought leadership. So maybe there are networks and groups who would benefit from your facilitation skills. So maybe there's an opportunity there to go and practice. Maybe you can do that for the time being online. So you create a little networking group and you facilitate it. You practice and hone those skills. And as you get better and better and better and stronger at this, listen and watch out for the responses that you get back from the work that you're doing. And then obviously on the other side there will be face-to-face. Again, face-to-face groups will come into play again, undoubtedly, and so maybe there's an opportunity there for offering your time and energy to facilitate workshops or courses or speaking events, and then be there as a facilitator. I just use that as a random example. There are many others, from data analysis through to presentation skills, through to strategic decision making, to at the end it's endless, the whole sort of range of things that you could do. But if you can identify, maybe just prioritize the values and the skills and the experience and the stuff that you have to offer, and then figure out who's going to get value from those things if you were to bring those to your audience. And it could be that these are new audiences. It could be that you actually don't know where best yet to offer those skills and experience. So once you've kind of honed in the message and you've honed in the descriptions of the things that you have to offer, it's probably then worth having a chat, maybe sort of a quiet Zoom or Skype call, or conversation with anybody who you're kind of locked at home with right now, and just explore who might be benefiting from those kinds of skills and experience that you're bringing. See if you can figure out whether you know a friend of a friend, or a contact of a contact, or a colleague of a colleague who might be interested in talking to you. This is a great time for collaboration. None of us are living in isolation. The power of the internet, the fact that you're watching or listening to this recording right now, is testament to the fact that we are all very much connected. If not, you could argue more than before. So use the power of your network and your contacts and your contacts of your contacts to explore ideas and try and then build a little bit further into the concepts and the ideas that you've just started to manifest. and make a note at every point in the journey. You know, if you're shaping up something here for this business idea, for this brand that you've got, for this existing company, or for yourself, it's all about record keeping and journaling. Make notes as you go, draw more mind maps, make video or voice calls to yourself so that you can keep a record of this journey, because every little moment is an opportunity for that little golden nugget, that little moment of suddenly the light bulb came on, suddenly I've now got a great idea, suddenly I know how to take this forward, suddenly I've reprioritized and now I know where my focus needs to be. So it's a really important thing to keep a record of it. Little video diaries are brilliant because they just give you a visual and audible reaction to everything, because you can then look and watch them back and sort of see the way that you describe things. And if you see your eyes light up or you see your body language change when you describe a certain thing, it's great because you're doing almost like self-psychology on yourself, and you can identify then where it's not only engaging with the head, but it's also engaging with the heart. And that's what we're after here. So as we start to think about our businesses on the other side, if we start to think about how our sort of career or personal life is going to develop, let's start to project forward, start to then turn and look back and see where those gaps are. This is an amazing opportunity. We can do this for a course, we can do this for career development, we can do this for personal development and self-awareness. This technique of reverse engineering from a point in the future when you're living this most amazing life is such a powerful way of doing it. It brings gravitas and clarity to your thinking. It's not just about looking forward into this void of opportunity and thinking, I don't even know where to start. It's all about thinking really carefully and creatively, but defined around an end destination. So if you're really strategic, you might even look 10 years out or even longer, but don't put the horizon too far out. Make it something that you feel is manageable. Maybe, as we say, 5-6 years is probably far enough for most people. Maybe even a year is enough for you. If you're that kind of person, stick with that. I'm not telling you the timeline, it's your timeline. But take the opportunity right now. There's never been a better opportunity to reverse engineer your future. And I think brands, to bring this kind of full circle for the earlier conversation that I had, I think brands and businesses who are kind of figuring out right now what their marketing is going to look like on the other side, what the opportunities are going to look like on the other side, need to firstly just recognize that there is no normal. We are not going back to normal. We're going to create a new normal, and that's what's so exciting here. So figure out, if you can, what your new normal is. If you can't figure that out, get in touch. We can have a conversation. More than happy to chat this through. You know, the beauty of right now is that most of us have more time than we had. So this is all about quality thinking and planning. If you want to get hold of me, I'm Neil at marketingcollege.com, and I'd be very, very happy to explore this concept with you a little bit further. So I hope to see you on a recording again very, very soon.